I've been into self-development and personal growth for about as long as I can remember. And for so many years, I had this idea that mastery would be this feeling of just sort of being on fire all the time, like endless inspiration and endless momentum. And I spent a lot of time trying to find that, trying to look for a way to get to the right path or the right practice. And then if I got there somehow, it would just kind of carry me, and smoothly and gloriously I would achieve everything that I'd set out to do. I don't exactly know where that idea came from. I think it came a lot from the world in which we live, and the sort of the images that we absorb of the creative genius lost in their work, or the athlete who's getting up and going out to the track at 4 a.m. We have this real cultural mythology around mastery. And it's oftentimes portrayed to us as this type of constant high and this unbroken surge of momentum. But that's not what it turned out to be for me. And maybe that's not what mastery is going to look like for you either. So today I'm going to share with you the deeper meaning of mastery, something beyond that myth of the high achiever. Because what I've come to understand over years of practice and reflection, and a few moments of personal burnout, definitely, what I've learned to realize is this: mastery doesn't feel like being on fire all the time. It feels like learning how to live within your own rhythm, a rhythm that flows, that ebbs, and that flows again. And today I want to talk to you about that rhythm of mastery. Because if you've ever felt discouraged when your momentum has faded, and I'm sure it has, and maybe you're watching this video now because you feel like you need to sort of get that jump start, or you need to gain that momentum and inspiration once again. You don't need to feel guilty about that, or to feel anxious about when that clarity and momentum has disappeared. So hopefully this video is going to bring you a sense of relief in that regard. I remember the first time that I really experienced a state of flow. It was amazing. I was giving my first university lecture, and it all just really flowed. I had prepared in advance. I prepared a lot, of course, but once I was up there in front of about 100 students, something really magical just happened. It was kind of like the words were just pouring out of me, and it was euphoric. It felt really, really good. And so afterwards, I began to chase that feeling. And I had this idea that that's what mastery must feel like. And that's what it's meant to be, the state of just incredible euphoric flow and connection. And I began to work harder, and I read more productivity books, and I tracked my habits, and I organized my desk, and I lit my candles, and I drank my green tea, and I did all of these things. And yet that state of flow didn't really emerge in the same way. Again, sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, and sometimes just kind of nothing at all. And I really began to take it personally for a while. I thought that maybe I had lost it, or maybe I didn't want it enough, or maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. And, maybe I needed to have better habits, better routines, better discipline. And over time, and honestly, through some pretty humbling and difficult experiences, I began to understand something far more compassionate about mastery. Mastery isn't something that we force. Flow isn't something that we force. It is something that we welcome. And just like anything in nature, it has its rise and fall. It has its season. Think of how the moon moves through its phases, how our breath rises and falls, how the ocean has low tide and high tide. Real mastery isn't about staying switched on all the time. It's about staying present through the high tide and the low tide, because there are seasons of expansion for all of us, and there are also seasons of contraction. There are moments when we are blossoming, and there are moments when we just need to kind of compost something that's older and that we no longer need. That's not failure. That is not a lack of mastery. That's just nature. And in fact, as I've learned to live more in sync with these types of rhythms, really the more resilient and creative I've become. And the less shame that I feel when maybe just for a little bit of time the ideas aren't coming, or maybe I just need to rest. There's wisdom in that. There's wisdom in listening. There's wisdom in stillness. And if you're in a season like that, if you're in a season where you're not going out and achieving everything that you want to now, maybe you're just in that period of wintering, that period of just composting, that period of stillness. There's nothing wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different part of the cycle. If you're interested in exploring these ideas more deeply, these sort of cyclical rhythms of how we experience life and interact with the world, I've created a whole bunch of teachings and guided reflections over on my Patreon. And they're really made for people who are ready to move beyond that burnout culture that we all live in and move toward a slower, more sustainable, but also really fulfilling and really positive and productive kind of life. So I'll pop the link below. It might be something that you're interested in. You're definitely warmly invited and welcomed over there. But there's no secret, I've learned, to mastery. Mastery is not about force. Mastery is about fidelity. Mastery is about continuing to show up through all of the seasons. It's about staying faithful to our path, even when that path is not as glamorous, perhaps, as we would like it to be, even when it's not turning out the results, even when the world isn't standing around applauding us. Because we're going to have those high seasons, those moments when our energy is really strong and our focus is really sharp, and you ride that wave. You give it your all. You create, you ship, you love, you move, you do all of those things, and we know how good that feels. But we also need to remind ourselves to not become over identified with or addicted to those moments, because there are going to be low seasons as well that we need to honor and feel compassion toward. Those seasons when we're tired or uncertain or quiet. It can be really hard in those moments to not simply abandon ourselves. We think that we have lost it. We've lost the spark. We've lost the ability to achieve. We've not. That's the most important thing that we need to remember there. Instead, in those moments of winter or midnight or low tide, just stay close. Just rest. Just listen and let that silence speak. There's a really fantastic line in A Course in Miracles that I often think of. It says, the Holy Spirit will direct you very specifically. And that specificity isn't always a blueprint. It's not always a spreadsheet. We think that when we're waiting to hear inspiration or the voice of the muses, that it's going to say, do this, this is what's going to happen next, this is how to achieve. Because sometimes we do hear that voice. But that voice of the Holy Spirit, the voice of the muse, the voice of inspiration or the world, whatever it may be, it's always speaking to us. Sometimes it just speaks to us slightly differently. Sometimes it sounds like, now's the time for waiting, or now's the time for planting, or now's the time for letting go. And that's the type of specificity that comes from rhythm and the rise and fall of our natural creative flow. So maybe right now you are sort of in that spring season, new ideas, fresh momentum, the sense that life is really opening up again. That's beautiful. Run with it. Maybe you're in autumn, preparing for that quieter season, reflecting a little bit. You come to the end of a big project, or you've just got, sort of that big recognition at work, and you've been able to celebrate that. And now you are going inward for a little bit to reflect. Maybe some of you are in that season of winter where the ideas aren't flowing, where productivity isn't at its best. I'm not talking here about the real seasons of the year. However, I think that there's a lot to say about how our creativity cycles through in a very similar way to the natural world. I'm not speaking about actual winter here. I'm speaking about maybe not having that spark, not having that inspiration, not having that momentum, dedication, or focus that you've had before. And that's all right, because that's simply where you are now, in this moment of stillness and pausing and hibernating. And if you begin to become fearful about not having that spark, not having that inspiration, not having that sense of mastery you once had, you'll be clinging on to where you are now. And you don't want that. You want to learn the lessons from this moment of quiet, this moment of reflection, this moment of turning inward. And then once those lessons have been learned, you move into the next season, into that season of growth and expansion and newness. And whatever season you are in with your creative potential at the moment, I hope that you know it is not a detour from your path. That is your path, that natural rise and fall of mastery and motivation is your creative journey. And learning to trust that and to really trust that is one of the most important developments in developing our spiritual maturity. So, as you move through your week and through the rest of your day, maybe take a quiet moment and ask yourself, what season am I in? And what does this season invite me to trust? Mastery isn't about being on fire all the time. It's about learning how to tend that fire wisely so that it lasts and that it doesn't burn out and never come back. It's about becoming someone who can really weather that whole cycle of inspiration and ideas without giving up on themselves. And when we learn to do that, it becomes really, really exciting. Each moment can feel like it is just part of this unfolding of a continual process of your selfhood. So thank you for being here today, for walking this path of rhythm rather than just, falling into that hustle culture that's around us all the time. And if you want to continue exploring these ideas, continue to explore these ideas of how we can be productive and creative and contribute to the world, but do it in a slow and soulful way, you'll find my Patreon link below. And of course, if this video resonated with you, share it with someone else who maybe is in that sort of autumn or winter of their seasons of mastery, because maybe this will be the video that really speaks to them today. Until next time, be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you really soon.